Hi, my name is Megan, and this is Everything Lit. And today I'm bringing you my February wrap up. So I read 7 books in February, and one of them was a chonker. Let's talk about it. I am going to talk about these in order from least favorite book to most favorite book of the month. Starting with the only real stinker, we have How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. I believe I'm giving this 2 stars. It might be a 2.5 rounding up to 3 on Goodreads. I'm struggling with this one. So I listened to this on audio. It is a literary fiction, time travel-esque type story. Our main character, Tom Hazard, is becoming a teacher. The weird thing is he's been alive since the 1500s. He was born in France in the late 1500s and has this genetic disorder where he doesn't age like normal people. So he's around 400 years old and he looks only in his 40s. And he is part of this society of people like him. It's called the Albatross Society. They try to bring other people like them into the society and give them a purpose, because that's really hard when you have such a long life to keep having a purpose. Then he's becoming a teacher at this middle school in England, and he meets this woman, Camille, and she sparks something in him that he thought he'd lost. But one of the things that this doesn't tell you, and I'm not sure if it's a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it, but Tom does have a mission/reason to live besides this new romance. In fact, the romance is actually a very small portion of the book. This goes back and forth throughout Tom's life. So we start in current day England when he's becoming this teacher, but then we'll get flashbacks to Shakespearean England, and we'll get flashbacks to the 1920s and what Tom has been doing all this time. What I didn't like about this was Tom, the narrator. It very much gave off old white man reminiscing about how times were better back in the day, but also something about this, and spoilers, I read Addie LaRue earlier this month, and that has a similar premise, even though very different, but it's both people living for a very long time. Both of them were born in France. Why is that the thing to make someone born in France in the 1700s live a long time? What is it about France specifically that you think that type of person is gonna live a really long time? I don't understand. That's just a weird coincidence, Anyway, this felt a little heavy-handed, but also, of the characters in here, Tom Hazard's story is the least interesting. He has friends and past family members who also have this disease who would have been way more interesting to follow. The other thing that strained my credulity was that he met Shakespeare and became friends with Shakespeare, and he met F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he met all these famous people just by being in the right place, right time. And on the one hand, yeah, absolutely, if you were in Paris in, the 1920s, you totally could have run into Fitzgerald in a bar. That's not outside the realm of possibility. But when you have a story like this, where you have a character who is living multiple centuries and can meet a lot of famous people, you don't want to he's always in the right place at the right time to meet this person who makes history. Come on. There were definitely times when I was rolling my eyes listening to the audiobook, not having a great time. I didn't like it. It technically wasn't even time travel. And I found the main character to be a very woe is me kind of person. And the villain, just no, thank you. And I don't think I will be reading anything else by Matt Haig. I don't think his worldview really meshes with mine. Speaking of Addie LaRue, I gave this 3.5 stars. So not much better than How to Stop Time. This is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is a fantasy, a historical fantasy of contemporary with magical elements. Basically, Addie LaRue is running away from an impending marriage. Her parents are forcing her to marry this guy in their town because it's 1700s France, tiny little village. She's not going to go anywhere. And she runs away because she has big dreams, and she meets the darkness, or this, old god, this spirit, and he makes a deal with her. She can live forever. She can live as long as she wants. But when she is done wanting to live, she'll give this guy her soul. With that deal, he makes it so that no one can remember her. So as soon as she leaves the room, people forget she existed. And it's not like she comes back in and they remember, they just forget forever. I really enjoyed the first 250, 300 pages. I think that it is a slow character exploration. It was really interesting to see Addie LaRue figure out the confines of her curse, of her deal. This is also told in two timelines. We have the past where Addie makes this deal, and then throughout time bringing us up to 2014 when this, like, current day. So we have the 2014 timeline and then Addie's past, but this also has dual point of view where we get Addie's point of view and then we get Henry's point of view. Henry is the other main character. So Henry is our second character and he remembers Addie. She goes into the bookstore one day and he says, "I remember you." And thus starts the main plot. I don't know. Like, because that doesn't start the story. The story is about Addie, but that is kind of the plot. What I liked about this, the beginning was very interesting in the way it meditated on art and creation and the muse of artists and how we are inspired to create and legacies. And it just had a lot of interesting things to say. And I was into that. And I was into the quiet character exploration. I liked Addie. I wanted to know more about her and the way she thought of things and how her life turned out. What I did not like Henry very much. I have issues with stories set in New York, and their timeline, Henry's story is set in New York. So I have issues with that a little bit. And he kind of felt like a bit of a whiner. His perspective was fine. As a character, he was fine. But compared to Addie, I didn't care for him. And especially as their friendship and more begins to grow, I didn't like him for her. I couldn't see why they were together other than the fact that he remembers her. And maybe that should have been enough, because otherwise she'd be lonely. And really the only thing was that she wanted someone. And it could be, but that's the thing, like, it could be anyone, couldn't it? At that point, you're not showing me why it's him. You know, it just didn't come together for me. And then you have the darkness as a reoccurring character in her life and kind of the villain, but not really the villain. But he's the villain. They have like this tempestuous relationship. I'm going to put spoilers on the screen because I have to talk about spoilers to get across why this book perplexes me so much. So spoilers. So Addie makes another deal with this devil darkness guy to save Henry. Right? And basically imprisons herself or yokes herself to the darkness. And now they're like together and she's with him until he doesn't want her anymore. And like, why? But why? Why is that the choice? Like, okay, so Henry is the first person who remembered her. So she's going to give up everything for him. Like, okay. In the beginning of the book, Addie is running away from this forcible marriage. And she admits that the man is not a terrible man. He's not a bad man. He's just not what she wanted. He is a chain to make her world smaller. And then she frickin' makes another deal and yokes herself to a man who has proven himself to be kind of a shitty person, because he's not really a person. He's some sort of god darkness thing. But he's not treated her well. He put her in this situation and she's going to tie herself to him for Henry. And now here's the thing. I was kind of rooting for her in the darkness. I wanted them to like prove themselves equals, and like she kind of outwitted him at times, like, but I wanted them to have this back and forth, this like across time, I don't know, not romance, but challenge, this thing. And at the end, if she had ended up with him and been like, yeah, this was what it was meant to be, we were supposed to be each other's like helpmeets and Henry needs to find someone else, it would have been better. Than the way it ended is kind of ambiguous, but she's like, I'm gonna beat him and I'm gonna win. And like the ending just did not lend itself to a satisfying conclusion. It was ambiguous about where they go from here. She was in the same situation that she ran away from just like 400 years later. Like, I did not understand the overall, like, the point. What's the point? I guess it was just getting to know Addie, and this is the situation she's in. But what it felt like was the author was writing this interesting story about this character and just getting to know her and what art means and what your legacy means. And then about 300 pages in was like, oh shit, you know, I might need a plot for this. Tie this whole thing with Henry and the darkness up nice and neat. And I was like, no. So I really enjoyed this up to a point, and then the ending, I did not like it, and I'm upset about it. So this was 3.5 stars. Moving on up, we have The Memoirs of Cleopatra by Margaret George. This was 4 stars. I really enjoyed this, despite it being very long. I listened to most of the audiobook for this. This was so detailed and so interesting. It really made ancient Egypt I don't want to say come alive, because that sounds cheesy, but I feel like I learned a lot about history, about these people as fictional characters, and this kind of reminded me why I liked historical fiction in the first place, because you get to take some things that are true out of it, even if the story overall is kind of fictionalized. But like the battles that happened, the people that Cleopatra met, all of those are based on real people and real events. So I don't know, it's like a gray area where this is not nonfiction that you can trust is 100% true, but it's not fully fiction in that none of it's true, you know? It sits in that gray area, and I really enjoy that. So this is about Cleopatra. It is her like memoirs from a very young age up until her death, and just her life as the ruler of Egypt, her relationship with Caesar, her relationship with Mark Antony, and how she ran her country and how she kept her throne and how she wanted her children to keep the Egyptian throne. It was very detailed. It was very detailed. And the only drawback really was the pacing. The pacing was difficult to keep up with because sometimes you'd spend 100 pages and it would be like a couple weeks because we were following her day by day. A lot of stuff was happening. And then we'd do another 100 pages and it would be like 5 or 6 years. And so that balance really made it difficult to keep track of when we were and how old she was and how much time had passed. Overall, I really liked this, and if you are into really long historical fiction, it might be worth it. I had so many 5 stars this month. I didn't realize until like the end of the month when I finished everything, but I'm so excited that I had so many 5 stars. So the first one I gave back to my friend, and that is Falling by TJ Newman. This is a thriller. So Falling is a thriller about a man who gets a call that his family is being held hostage, and either his family will die or he's going to crash the plane that he is piloting and kill everyone on board. Those are his 2 options, and we just follow this really tense situation as it plays out. Oh my gosh, it was nonstop. It was bananas. There were twists and turns, and absolutely enjoyed it. I don't want to say I loved it, but I had a great time reading it. It was a super quick read, and I'm so glad my friend recommended it to me and let me borrow their copy. I liked the characters. I liked the pacing. I liked the twists. You couldn't see what was coming. The only thing that was a drawback for me that I didn't really care for was the antagonists, not just as characters, but like when you're reading a book and you're thinking about the themes and the impact of the book on the world, the people who hijacked this plane or who are holding this plane hostage were from the Middle East. And so you couldn't pick any other kind of villain, any other nationality, any other ethnicity. Like, you couldn't have it be a white dude. Like, come on. So that was my only did we have to do it this way? Next, I read The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This was also 5 stars. Oh my gosh. So this is a horror. This is about a woman who marries a rich man. We're in Mexico during the Spanish Inquisition and the Mexican Civil Wars. So she marries this man to get out of her city and have stability, and goes with him to his country, Hacienda. Oh my gosh, this was very scary. And it did not start slow. It really took off with scary stuff from go. If you've seen Crimson Peak or Red Mexican Gothic, it has those vibes, that storyline, a classic Gothic story where a young woman, new husband, goes to this house and then there is bad stuff happening. And he has a previous wife who has died. This also has dual perspective with our main character Beatriz and the local priest Andres, and they, of course, she goes to her local priest to try and get this house exorcised, and their relationship starts to deepen. I adored this. I loved the characters. I liked the scares. I liked the writing. I will say it did start off slow for me. I was a little worried I wouldn't like it, but I think once I hit the 70-page mark, I was here for it. So this was also 5 stars. I read a romance this month, and that was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. Another 5-star. Amazing. As I said, this is a romance, and this is a sapphic romance, so female. It was wonderful. I loved the characters. I loved the plot. I loved how their separate journeys, they each had their separate conflicts, that their romance helped them to progress as people in their own lives. So this is about Astrid Parker, and she is going to be the lead designer on this show that's really famous called Inside America. She's landed this job to renovate the inn in her small Oregon town called Bright Falls. And Jordan is the granddaughter of the owner of this inn. She sort of grew up playing at this inn over her summers and has fond memories of it. And she is the head carpenter who is going to work with Astrid to design the building. And it is so good. It's kind of enemies to lovers because they have a interaction when they first meet that really sets them on edge and makes them not like each other. But then the way their relationship grows and they grow to understand each other and talk about their problems and their feelings, it was just fantastic. I love Astrid. I think they both, Astrid and Jordan, deserve the world. I loved this romance so much. And I think this will be the kind of book that I reread. I don't reread a lot of books anymore, but this was everything. Did I mention it was 5 stars? Because it was 5 stars. Could you tell? It's 5 stars. And finally, the last book I read in the month, the book that kept me up until like 1 a.m, the book that solidifies Naomi Novik as one of my favorite authors, is Spinning Silver. This is a fantasy and it is fantastic. It is kind of a retelling of the Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale about turning silver into gold, but it has Russian/Polish fairy tales integrated in it, like the Starik are the winter people, and then you have a fire demon, and it is wonderful. I could not have told you at the beginning of this book where the plot was going. I could not have told you where the characters were going. It was everything. We have three-ish main characters, but we get a lot of different perspectives in this. So we have Miriam, who is moneylender's daughter, and her father is very kind and doesn't collect on the debts that he lends out, and Miriam grows up and decides, I will collect the debts then, and becomes very like cold and she's a businesswoman. Her family is Jewish, and so they get a lot of hatred already. So she thinks, why not? I'm going to collect on our money. And then we have Wanda, who is a local girl in the town whose father is abusive. She becomes Miriam's like helper and takes care of her family while she's out, and they sort of, I don't want to say become friends, but they definitely become friends. And then we have Irina, who is a duke's daughter, and she ends up catching the eye of the Tsar. The relationships in this are wonderful. The characters, you feel for them, and the magic in this book is so engrossing and beautiful. And oh my God, I teared up like 3 times, and at the end I just laid in bed and like wanted to cry. I don't have the right words to describe how fantastic this book is. This is layered and nuanced and interesting, and the plot I think is so well crafted. All of these pieces come together in the end to make just a fantastic story. And this came out in like 2018, and I've been putting it off for years because I knew that it would be good. I knew I would love it, and I did. And I'm so happy. So those were the 7 books that I finished in February. Let me know what you read, maybe what your favorite book of the month was. I still can't believe I had 4 5-star reads. Insane, especially after January, where it was just like 3-star after 3-star after 3-star. So thank you for watching, and if you liked this video, you could like it, or you could subscribe to me and see what I read in March. But really, you can do whatever you want, and I'll see you next time.